All right, welcome to how we deliver experiences that matter through streaming. I just want to take a minute to let you guys all introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about your roles at your companies.
All right, hi. So my name is Pascal Debroek. I'm head of customer service at Hatch Entertainment, and we are a cloud-based game streaming service.
Hey, how's it going? I'm Thor Gunnarsson. I'm the co-founder and CEO at Mainframe Industries. We are a pan-Nordic game studio founded by a group of ex-CCP, Remedy, and Next Games veterans, making what we hope to be is the next generation of online games on the cloud.
Hi, I'm Steve, the founder and CEO of a company called Antstream, and we deliver some of the best games you've ever known, retro games, through a cloud streaming subscription service.
Hello, I'm Armin. I'm in charge of business development at Lima, the guys behind Doodle Jump.
Hi there, I'm Marek Rubasinski. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer at Polystream. We are a command streaming technology and platform powering other people's services at scale.
Hi, I'm Phillipe. I'm with Robot Cash. We're a storefront on the blockchain allowing for the resale of games for the first time at retail online.
Awesome, cool. So,
Too many mics for once.
I've got enough hands for this. Okay, so to start off, is streaming a fad or is it here long term? I think this is the question that people want to ask.
Well, I'm going to start. I think it's definitely here for the long term. I think you just have to look at every other media and entertainment space where it's become dominant already in certain segments, but I think it's going to take a lot longer than people expect. TV, it took 10 years to go from a standing start to dominating, but only then in a sort of under 35 segment, and we'll see the same in games. It's going to be a multi-year journey to be big.
No, I mean, if you jump in.
No, I mean, I think you're absolutely right. It's with music. You've seen this with music and movies already. You'll see parallel. At the moment, you could get CDs and MP3s, but then the streaming of Spotify came online. We're in a transition period. We're in, I guess, an early adopter period for gaming right now. But I think you're going to, without a doubt, see this become mainstream when it becomes more convenient than, or less painful than downloading a game.
Yeah, so I'll make a super old school analogy, which will date me horribly. So currently, game developers have to develop for VHS and Betamax, and there might be other formats out there. Speaking purely from a development perspective, being able to target a single runtime when you develop for the cloud has massive cost and complexity efficiencies. And I think that is maybe one aspect of why streaming will become such a natural option as we go forward and as we see the infrastructure roll out to support the games of the future.
I guess my turn. I'm along with all my colleagues with one little exception. Streaming is happening, not denying it, but I think it's going to be really different than what's happening in linear media, film and television. I think there's going to be this really split demographic of those who, I want my game, I'm downloading my game, and it's not just a question of today streaming is kind of conky and I don't have my 5G, down the pipe, etc. So yes, it's here, but it's not going to be here, in my opinion, in the same way as film and TV.
Okay, just to go further from that, why do you think streaming is particularly important in the games industry compared to other forms of media?
Look, I mean, from my point of view, the big advantage for streaming from a consumer point of view is accessibility and user experience, actually. People think of streaming about user experience, about latency, but it's not just about that. I'll use a book analogy. I love having a paper-based book in my hands. That's a great experience. But actually a better experience for me is to be able to order my book online, have it instantly on my phone, have it read to me when I'm in the car. And that's what streaming does, is it allows you to access the games wherever you are, and instantly.
I would probably add to that as well that unlike TV and music, where it's still TV and music, but the features are super cool, so shared playlists are a thing that you can do, CDs, box sets that also play and start and stop on different devices are something that you can do with VHS. But with games, you'll be able to develop experiences and games that you could never have locally installed because you'll have the power of the cloud. We don't know exactly what that is, but Thor's having a good crack at at pointing us in the right direction, I think that's going to be the key difference. There will be experiences that you could not have if they weren't cloud-based.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that, actually, that I don't think it has actually been stated yet. Like, we don't have that cloud-based gaming hit yet at this point. However, I mean, the future is going to show what that is going to be. Well, what we can see is indeed that there is massive amounts of data being consumed by users right now. It's constantly growing. Operators are having second thoughts about data caps. I mean, I'm lucky enough to live in Finland, so we don't have any data caps, so I can just stream the whole time and will not be billed extra. But I think it will also have an effect on user acquisition. Like the instant play kind of feature is gonna revolutionize, in a sense, the user acquisition funnel that we currently have, where users are seeing an ad, downloading the game, and then noticing that, hey, this is not something that I actually wanted to play. And with instant play, that's gonna be gone.
Yeah, just to quickly tack on to that, I think in addition to instant play, which is an obvious benefit of the cloud, the frequency of engagement that you can realize by, for example, in our case, we're creating a game that is delivering a sort of AAA immersive experience that simply would be impossible on mobile or on current generation mobile. If we start from the position of a larger screen like console or PC, to be able to replicate that experience on mobile gives you many more touch points throughout the day and gives you completely different engagement loops that become possible because the game is also available on mobile. And I think that is, in addition to instant play, that frequency of engagement and ultimately retention becomes a critical factor and a big game changer for the cloud.
Yeah, to be on the flip side, yes, yes, and yes. Technology-wise, we talked about it 5 years away, but at the end of the day, do I want to play all of my games on all of my platforms? No. I mean, yeah, get the casual guy. Match 3 I can play on any platform. I'm not playing my RTS or my Deep RPG on my phone. I'm sorry. Old school. So I think what people are not evaluating or not properly giving the priority, which is it's going to take not just a long time technology-wise. You're going to have to create special content. You're one of the few. That's cool. That's awesome. But then you get all this great content we have in the past that's not going to really work for that, in my opinion, which is why, look, we said the PC platform was dead. Remember that before Valve? Back in the day, for those of you who've been around, it's dead. Well, long live PC, right? So that's my point.
Okay, no, that's a very good point. So thinking about the limitations of streaming, obviously we have a limited streaming both on through the internet and through mobile data, etc. But do you think that's viable to the average consumer that doesn't have access to that? Because it's very accessible, but obviously not a lot of people are going to be using it on a global scale.
Yeah, I think we're actually here at the beginning of this era. Like, we're seeing that mobile operators are investing very heavily right now in 5G infrastructure, for instance. We're talking about investing about $1 trillion by 2030. That's a massive amount of money. Obviously, well, Rome wasn't built in one day. I don't think 5G networks are going to be built in one day either. I think it's more a wait and see kind of thing right now, but if we don't capitalize on what is going on right now, then we will never get there, actually. Like, it's the same as, like, what if we would not invest in a space program and then all of a sudden the Russians are there with Sputnik? So it happened before. Like, let's not have that happen again.
I mean, we could totally continue to curate our music over a USB connection to our iPod. That would be, we control our own collection that way. I mean, look, you look at the old ways of doing things. I mean, video seemed like an impossible application for mobile until 4G happened. And it enabled a completely new swathe of companies and value creation. I think, to echo the point, 5G is absolutely going to do the same thing. When that will happen, certainly not around the corner. I mean, the best educated guesses are meaningful consumer penetration within the next 3 to 5 years. So this is still a ways out. But if you're preparing for that eventuality, now is a good time to start, certainly if you're creating original content for the medium.
It's interesting because I had a conversation with someone earlier who couldn't really distinguish the difference between 4G and 5G, and obviously it's a lot more expensive, but there's no way to really explain it to a casual user. So what would you kind of say to people who are cynical of this, tech movement and, how it differs?
Just one comment. I had a discussion with a guy that's in actually car making, and he told me that everybody is investing into autonomous driving, all the car makers. and what they need is 5G. So I think it's going to happen a lot quicker than everybody believes or thinks. So is it going to be 3 or 5 years? I don't know, but I think it's going to become a lot quicker. So you can't be cynical about it if I...
Yeah, no, that's perfectly reasonable. So what problems do you think that streaming solves?
Storage?
Yeah, I think it depends on the content. I mean, for you, you're doing these big games that you wouldn't be able to deliver on the normal content, on a normal device. For us, we have 1,000 retro games, and actually I have 5 different devices. I don't want to be downloading those on all my different devices. So as I said earlier, it's about convenience and accessibility.
Yeah, we're not talking purely from consumer perspective or also from business owner perspective. Because I think from especially operator side, I think there is a definite benefit towards game streaming. Like I said, they're putting this massive amounts of money into developing this infrastructure. And when these operators were investing very heavily in 4G, they actually never saw their return of investment back. Like, it's like, hey, we're building this really great thing, and people started using it, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, where's our value proposition here now? What are we going to get back? And 5G actually might be that. That is why, on our side, at least at Hatch Entertainment, we have these partnerships with mobile operators where we are actually seeing that we are the thing that they can sell to end users. Like, this is the gaming service that you get on your mobile subscription. And that allows them to actually recoup at least part of the investments that they have made into the infrastructure. And I think there are similar things like that going on. And at least from the business perspective, that would be the takeaway.
Okay.
So I think the obvious is you're going to save on hardware, you're going to save on hassle, you're going to have all these good things. But in my opinion, there's some dangers. What about your personal information? What about your data? What about control? I was reading this article about the negative latency that Google's going to do on Stadia. I'm freaking out. You mean they're controlling what I'm going to gameplay next, which means they know what I'm thinking? So there's a huge issue there, and Europeans are very about their private data. So I don't hear anybody addressing that. When it's on the internet, it's bad enough. Now it's in somebody's Google Cloud. Think about that.
I think furthering that as well, there's also a worry that you're paying for these subscription services and you're paying to play these games, and yeah, and once they've gone, how do you continue that? I suppose.
Excuse me. So I'm in the online games business. There's no way to play a game without an online connection. So ownership of the game is one thing if you're playing a single-player game, of course. So that's a factor. When it comes to privacy, I would posit that one of the biggest advantages for a game developer is the fact that you are streaming video frames, essentially. There is no client. So when it comes to hacking the client, for example, and dealing with all of the sort of problems you have in a traditional client-server environment, most of that goes away when you begin streaming frames. So it's actually a sea change in terms of how games will work and how they'll actually lead to a more enjoyable experience, particularly for online games.
Yeah, and I'd also say there's an advantage to the publishers as well. I mean, without a doubt, we have games on Antstream that the publishers just wouldn't have allowed us to do as a download because they were too easy to copy and distribute. With streaming, there is no piracy. It gives the publisher control over their content.
Yeah.
Use the blockchain. That's the other option.
So I guess a company that's big, like moving into the streaming space right now is Google with Google Stadia, and the launch wasn't perfect. It had some problems. So do you think that ship has kind of sailed, or can Google pull this around and kind of make something good from this product?
I think I can answer that, having been on the inside of something about 10 years ago to do with TV streaming. So they've got a marketing problem. They went up on stage and said, this is going to be the best thing since anything. It's going to have everything. It's going to be amazing. You're going to be blown away. And then it wasn't. It's just like, and so they've paid the flame price for that, right? What they should have done is what Google are good at doing. It's like, here's a free beta. It's low key. Check it out. A few regions. We'll test and learn. And in about 2 years, we'll see if there's a product. But the problem they've got is it's a PR problem at the moment. They wouldn't be investing, they wouldn't have hired Jade, they wouldn't be investing in studios. They know it takes 4 or 5 years to create a AAA game, which means we're not actually going to see anything really interesting for 4 and 5 years. But they do have a PR problem.
Yeah, I think people get nervous with Google as well, perhaps because they have a history of dabbling in things and then dropping them when they don't work out. But I think they're sinking enough into this to make it work. I personally believe they'll be a major player in the industry. And the other thing is to think about what Google do. Google are a data and an advertising company. So I don't know what models they've got planned, but I'm pretty sure advertising will feature in it at some point.
Just to wrap up on what you said, we took Google Glass and what you talked about. I think they're going to be DOA on this one. Now, they're not going away. They're Google. But when they go deep and big on something, it works. Search engine. Think how they did that, right? You didn't hear about it right away. Work on it. Email, all that stuff. Google Cloud, all that. Fantastic. Every time. Yeah, that one was pretty bad. But in Amazon and games, let's talk about that, right? Same thing. So you've got these people that are getting in, but they fail to understand the fundamental. They hire the right people, but maybe they don't put the right structure in place. The fundamentals, 3 to 4 years, 5 years. You want a AAA, you want, Microsoft got it, Sony gets it, right? That's what they're missing. So they're not going away, but this particular iteration, like the glasses.
Okay. Just moving on from that, obviously Microsoft and Sony are both gearing up to launch new consoles this year. How much of a part do you think streaming will play in the lifespan of these next consoles?
I think this is where you see the kind of the early adopter and the transition. So I would imagine that what it will be the two will run in parallel. You'll be able to download your games, or if you want to stream them instantly, you'll do that. And I believe you can do that on PlayStation now anyway, actually. And the feedback I have actually is that's a fantastic service. So yeah, I think that's how that'll play out. And I guess whether this is the last generation of consoles depends how many people shift over, and they'll measure the playing patterns and take it from there. But my guess is these will be the last generation of consoles.
No, I would posit. Actually, there was someone up on stage a couple of speakers ago who was starting to talk about, these different devices coming into play. I think when you think about the world in the future where it's a cloud-first device, and Intel talk a lot about cloud-first devices coming in the future, and Dell showed that thing off at CS. I know that was like a sort of PC switch type thing, but the logical conclusion is, what do you actually need? We need a great screen. The technology we have, you need a good GPU, but it's not expensive to have a good GPU attached to a screen. You can have a $50 device that can play amazing games if you're plugged into the cloud. So I would say, I don't think devices are going away. I think even if you look at Stadia, you really want a Chromecast Ultra, right, to do that. Probably that's still a device. I just think the form factors and the concepts will change as you sort of rebalance and go, okay, my library's in the cloud, I'm powering things that I can only do in the cloud, but I still want a thing. And there is a wonderful simplicity for consumers to just go, here's a thing, plug the thing in, the thing works. It's kind of worked for a long time, and I don't see it completely going away.
I think you're right. There'll be devices, but I just don't think we'll have 50 terabyte hard drives sat in the middle. It'll be, yeah.
Potentially just for the niche.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
For the hardcore. The man over here.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is obviously a bright future for performant devices that can do local processing. Why would you do video streaming if you can do command streaming if the device supports it? Your OpEx costs are lower by doing so, et cetera. It just makes good business sense. So I think you'll see a hybrid future where there's a slow migration, and possibly there's always sort of this mixed model. But fundamentally, from the consumer's perspective, you shouldn't have to care what your end device is. If behind the scenes it's powered by Polystream, awesome. But if it's pure video streaming to, for example, a mobile device that wouldn't otherwise be able to render that, that is, a great argument for video streaming. So it'll be kind of mixed, I think, going forward.
So back to what you were saying, you could even look at how Google right now when you get it. I think you have to use a USB cable for some devices, and it's like you don't for the Chromecast. Super complicated, and that's Google, and that's today. I think, yeah, again, we're going there for streaming, but there's something amazing, and it's not even the hardcore. The midcore likes that everything in a box. Because if you're hardcore, you go on Steam, right? You download your PC, you tweak your whatever, your card, your video card, etc. For me, I'm more of a midcore, actually. I like, okay, everything in there is going to work. It went through the Sony or the Microsoft system, I'm done. It's going to be a long time before somebody figures out how to get every single one of your handsets to work together with your TV screens and everything else, because you've got 30 different brands. It's a challenge.
Just moving on from that, something I've just thought of. I think PC gaming has come quite a long way. There's kind of been a resurgence, and then esports is kind of driving the PC side again. Do you think that the rise in streaming and less need for hardware among general consumers is something that these hardware companies and manufacturing companies should be aware of? Is that something that's going to impact them? People buying less PCs because they can just stream?
I don't actually believe it's going to happen. I think people are going to buy stuff, right? It's just, we've heard a lot about this, and people might have said, oh, people are not going to buy expensive hi-fis anymore because I can just stream everything to my phone. Now I've got my Spotify on my phone. People are paying $600 for Sonos devices. They're paying $1,000 for a Sonos, massive home setup. They're paying $2,000 for a, Bang & Olufsen one. People are going to still buy stuff. So I think it might look different. It might, have a slightly different form factor, have a different market that they're going for. It might just be like an amazing screen with a great controller, but it's still going to be $400, and they're still going to be selling it at Best Buy for Christmas, right? So I don't think stuff's going away.
I agree and disagree. I think you're right, but in the same way as right now, there's a lot of people that still love vinyl, right? Yeah. But by far, the masses would prefer Spotify and the subscription service or Apple Music.
But they buy something different so they buy the $600 Sonos. So I agree, you'll have a subscription, but you'll still want to consume it on the thing that's great to consume.
True, but I think the mass market don't buy a Sonos. That's a smaller segment of the market that are more passionate about the music.
Yeah, I think, look, who's buying digital cameras today, right? I mean, yes, you have a point, but the flip side is you're right. I think to a certain degree, there's going to be some equipment going away. For me, but it's all about, it's got to work really, really well, right? If you're going to do away with digital cameras, that whatever phone you have has got to be crazy, 4K, whatever. Same thing with gaming. That's the part I have a more difficult time. You guys are more visionary than I am. I'm seeing like, wow, how am I getting the low latency? How am I getting those graphics, that experience? Yeah, there'll be new stuff, but that's the part where there's always going to be stuff to buy. On the gaming side, I'm committed to that. There's going to be stuff for a long time.
Yeah.
Just if I give one basic use case, which is in mobile gaming. So I don't know what the replacement cycles are these days, but they've been lengthening over the past few years. People are not renewing every 2 years as they used to just a handful of years ago. So that might be because kind of the price performance is kind of at a point where you're able to do most of the things that you want to do. If you're doing a very high-end mobile game that's kind of taxing the CPU, GPU on that device, you'll drain your battery in less than 2 hours. If you're streaming that game, the battery consumption is akin to watching Netflix. So suddenly mobile gaming actually as a use case on all mobile phones becomes much more compelling than it is currently if you're trying to play, for example, Call of Duty on your iPhone.
Yeah, I think there's still a novelty in physical, like you said, like vinyl has come back in a big way. And I'd like to, I'm a bit of a retro gamer, and I like the idea of getting out my retro console and playing it as I like to play it. But the reality is that how often am I going to do that? How often is anybody going to do that when they can just, stream it instantly?
And that was why we created Antstream, because you've got so many different devices, and actually, do I want 20 different consoles under my TV? There are purists that do, and there are purists that build these incredible rooms that have every cartridge and things that you can imagine. But again, it's not accessible to most people, and that was where we picked the cloud because it made it accessible. We can deliver it to everybody.
Yeah, and I like that. And then, those old games that people can't afford to buy because they're like £1,000 on a cartridge, they're accessible to everyone. So it's
that's the dream.
That's different. That's stuff that's not otherwise accessible. Yeah. I mean, that's why it's great what you're doing. But a lot of these games are accessible, and I don't want to play them on my phone, right? Because yours is different. So your streaming is a unique proposition.
Okay, so what do you think needs to happen over the next year or so for streaming to be more accepted and easier among the general consumer?
Well, the obvious answer would be 5G networks. I mean, it would just help. Other than that, I would also have to say that it's most likely going to be more powerful GPUs. That would actually help as well. Battery life, most likely as well. There is a lot of technical aspects that we actually would still need to consider before we actually can go full mass with these kind of things. But, well, it's the same story as what we were talking about before. Like, give it time, because we might not be there fully yet at this point.
Yeah, I'd say a year is a tough time horizon to say something like this, because you really want scale, right? If you're a publisher, you want millions of people to be able to use your game, and the services and the technology is just not there. If you are a gamer, you want millions of people playing the game so that you can play with your friends and there's a big community and all that stuff. So I think the best thing that can happen this year is we get to see some things that we haven't seen before that can only be done in the cloud, which gets people excited. And it doesn't have to be games, right? It could be quasi-game experiences or things that are interactive 3D that, again, you can't really do without streaming them. And that's going to push the service providers. The service providers are going to push the technology providers, and it's going to push the network providers. It's a chain, right? But the chain always starts with a consumer or a player at the end that wants to interact with a game or something else. And the more scale you have, the more it's going to push everyone further up the chain to raise their game.
Just saying, I mean, just a 5G network doesn't help. I mean, it needs to be rolled out. I mean, we're still running today into issues where we can't make a phone call because we don't have network connection, right? And if you, as a consumer, don't have the flawless experience, latency, whatever, then it's just not going to work. So that needs to happen, I think, in the first place.
Yeah, to me, in a year, it's like you said, nothing. But the way it's going to work is make a AAA game that's amazing and exclusive to streaming. That's when it's going to happen for me. You make a game that can only play on streaming, and it's AAA. Do the Sony model, do the whatever model, do the Nintendo model. I'm on it. You got me.
All right. Before I open up to an audience Q&A, do you guys want to add anything else? Nope. Okay.
Just one last point on that last question. The other thing is I think as an industry or people doing cloud, we have to pitch it right. If we pitch it today as something you can play anywhere, the user's going to get frustrated because it's just not true. If you're out in the middle of nowhere, you're not going to be able to stream your games. If you position it as something that's a second screen activity in your home and you're honest with the users that they need a good network, I think they'll embrace it.
Okay. Any questions? Audience questions? Anybody? There's, one behind you.
Yeah, I guess this is a question for you, Thor. So I guess, with the instant play, it reduces a lot of friction, but also when that loss of friction cuts the other way too, where you may only have a couple of seconds of your player's attention before they get bored and do something else and click away again. And you're working on big AAA experience native in the cloud. How are you thinking about how to sort of suck those players into a very deep and involving experience, sort of when you only have a few seconds to work with?
So I generally don't subscribe to the model that if you make them pay $60, you've given them some sort of a buyer's remorse that keeps them for 2 hours. I think you should be able to capture your players, whatever your core loop is. I can only speak to our case. We're creating an MMO. We have a background in that space, and social onboarding, social connections are a critical kind of moment that we try to engineer into our game as quickly as we can. But yeah, I mean, your game should be able to withstand 5 minutes of gameplay. That's just good game design. Sorry.
Question here on business model, because I'm hearing a lot about tech and a lot about content. And some time will solve both of those as well as market. But what do we think in terms of business model? Because if you look at the evolution of the game industry, we go from package to subscription, and now it seems like to microtransactions when you get phone, which becomes pervasive in PC and console, et cetera. But what does cloud mean for monetization? It sounds like a lot of thought around it. Is it back to subscription again or back to package again around it? If you look at Google, they're doing both with Stadia. So, what do you guys think the future of monetization is?
So I'm going to answer this from the old world again, because once you go into streaming at scale and once you're OTT and that friction is gone, it's not just either or. Your world becomes like a Rubik's Cube of, okay, this is ad funded, this is pay as you go. Then there's a bit of in-app, then I've got some sponsorship stuff, and then you start to build in the social layers, and then actually the monetization, there's no one answer, and that's...
So pretty much...
It gets complicated, right? But it also means that there's a huge opportunity for lots of different niches, and is it is it that you're monetizing purely through the advertising or the underlying data for the usage? It's all to play for, but there's not going to be a straightforward answer. But it does mean that you can do these things, because if you're just doing a $60 packaged game and there's too much jeopardy, you've spent 20 million developing it, you can't innovate. If you can go to market and it's frictionless and you can go over the top, you can take a risk, especially if you have an established model, like if you are EA or if you are someone else, you can take a risk, right? You can do it maybe with a different brand, you can do it in a different region, and take things from there.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just add a point on the subscription, because obviously that's what we do. I think, you know, we've seen a big shift towards subscriptions. My concern is you get subscription fatigue if there's too many of them. So I think it's really important that we don't find everybody thinks, well, actually, now I can deliver cloud or games directly myself via streaming, and I'm just going to slap a subscription model on the front. Because if everybody is doing that, we're all going to lose. You need to have just a few key platforms that are offering kind of all-inclusive content.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, whatever your thoughts on Google's launch in the last few months, I do like their business model. The fact that you can have a subscription that over time will be something like, you know, a Game Pass or a PlayStation Now, coupled with the fact that you can buy a la carte any game that's, you know, available on the platform. You know, it's effectively, you're getting effectively the same experience, because it's all sort of PC and console content at the moment. That will change over time. So as we start to see more original content show up, you know, that it'll be kind of an interesting space. I don't think it's all subscription at all. It's going to be much more multifaceted than that.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, actually, I was surprised that Google did, because their model seems really bad for the consumer, right? It's like, I'm charging you $10, and I'm going to make you pay full price for the games. And right now, I've got access to one game, that's about it. So I think what's happening, you're seeing Google dealing with the publishers, even though they gave them a lot of money. The publishers have said, you're not going to stream my game for free and give me 20 cents on the dollar. No, you're going to give me the whole thing. So I think it's going to have to evolve. Right now, Google's learning the hard way, because the publishers don't want to lose out, and the consumer. So there's no reason as a consumer for me to do that game. I'll just go buy on the PC. That's the problem right now.
But they're launching a free service this year.
Yeah, so they claim. They also claim they had 10 other features. So I'm all in. But
let's assume that they can execute on that.
Yeah, because right now they have one game.
It'll be exactly the same consumer proposition as if you were buying from Steam or from Apple.
So how many games are you going to get for free for that $10?
It doesn't matter. It's the same business model as when you go and buy a store from Steam or from Epic.
Yeah, but the difference is I'm not paying Epic at $10 a month.
No, you're not paying Google $10 a month when they launch the base service.
The free tier.
The free tier, right?
The mythical free tier.
Right, there you go.
I don't think they're launching in 2020 a free tier. Yeah. They can't afford to.
I'll be slightly more optimistic, but
it costs them 30 to 40 cents an hour. It costs them 30 to 40 cents an hour per user to stream.
Yeah, also real-time bandwidth is expensive.
It's not the bandwidth; it's the cost of the VMs in the cloud. It's 30 cents for the VMs, another 5 to 10 cents for the network egress and transit per hour per user.
I'm going to use you next time. He's got the data.
Any more questions? Good. Yep. A single one left. Then we can go to the pub.
I had a question that, is the future of streaming services in cross-platform, or will they focus on specific platforms and devices? So games need to be designed for their best control types of that platform, whether that's touch, controller, or keyboard. So do people actually want to play these console games on their mobile with a controller or really terrible touch input? And will developers even bother adapting their games for all those platforms?
So this is something we come across a lot, because we have a lot of games which weren't even designed, were designed before touchscreens even came out, and we have to make the controls work on those. And we do it, some games actually are better on touch. Take something like Operation Wolf, I can tap the screen, I can swipe for a grenade, it's better than it was in the arcade. There are others that don't translate so well. I think, actually it comes back to your point about devices. I think if you look at what Razer are doing with their kind of mobile joysticks, I think add a controller to a mobile phone and you've actually got a great experience.
I think it totally depends on whether you're talking about catalog content or new content. And indeed, I'm sure that there will be a raft of games that are made simply for one screen. So it's the value of doing it still holds, even though you're only targeting mobile, for example. or even if you're only targeting keyboard and mouse. But if you can pull off something that has multiple user experiences, it's great. But it's more complicated, obviously.
That's the key. Multiple user experiences designed for the target platform that you want to play on. I'm super bearish on the whole clip-on controller thing. When I see that, I just think, oh, Gizmodo, right there. That's no.
Or Switch.
But that's a Switch. But those are designed to play on the Switch, and you've got a screen like that big. It's not that big.
Endemic to the Switch. It's not making on any device.
Yeah,
that's the problem.
I like it.
It's a niche, but
Play retro games.
2.5 billion gamers,
I almost made a game for Gizmodo back in the day.
How did that work?
For hire. I'll do it.
Cool.
All right. If that's everything, then thank you guys for joining me.
Thank you.
Yeah.